Dr. Martine. I will start with Mr. Sprayberry. Thank you for comments. I especially appreciate it, and I mentioned it to the ranking member, what you said about the ad hoc situation and the problems that causes. From your experience in North Carolina, how would authorization of CDBG, DR, for which you advocate, how would it help deliver efficient, effective disaster assistance to survivors contrasted with what we do now?
Yes, sir, and thank you for that question. So, it will allow states to effectively plan to receive the funds, and that's critical. If it's codified and we know that it's coming, the team can begin planning. We know that's going to reduce delays in the implementation. As I mentioned, during Hurricane Florence, we waited for 500 days before we got our Federal Register notice. And so that was, when you have people standing by, I mean, to get that type of information, it slows everything up. So I think that that would help us out. I think also we want to talk about establishing a front-end fund for CDBG DR, a mechanism so that we can begin to procure staffing and have contracts in place so that when the funding is actually allocated from HUD and hits the state, we're well prepared to basically pivot and start getting that money to the people that need it most.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Did that 500 days did that surprise you, or we see that everywhere, more or less?
It did surprise me, sir. And so I can tell you that in Hurricane Matthew, we were hit in October, I think the 8th and 9th of October. Congress appropriated the funding in December, and we got the Federal Register in January. And so that was just a couple of months, and we were not prepared for Florence, which was our storm of record in North Carolina. Go ahead.
Okay, well, and it's so clear to me, listening to you, Mr. Sprayberry, and listening to the other two witnesses, that communities could use help in thinking through long-term housing and community recovery needs, and we do that better when we have a federal law sort of directing, I would hope could write it bipartisanly as we direct this agency and others on what to do. Let me shift to Dr. Martine. Based on your research, Dr. Martine, what policy changes through authorization could ensure that HUD disaster recovery dollars are distributed more equitably, more quickly, especially among communities that are almost always hit the hardest by these natural disasters?
Certainly, and we're talking about different pieces of what a permanent authorization allows, right? One is the actual knowing that there's going to be resources coming down, then the actual amount of the resources, and then the program rules. And all of these expedited and clear with clear expectations on the state and local grantees will be able to make programs much more robust, much more clearly addressing the most vulnerable communities in their regions that are affected. And that is particularly true of the most vulnerable, the extremely low-income folks that you're asking me about. I think in particular, those folks are the least likely to be able to survive waiting for a longer period. They're the ones who slip through the cracks. And so the earlier and more consistent amount of funding, the easier it is for state and local grantees to target and do outreach for those communities to ensure that they are applying and that they are eligible for the assistance that they are due.
Thank you. Let me pursue that. As you know, this Senate for the last 10 months is known in part for actually addressing issues of poverty, the child tax credit. 90% of families in my state with children under 18 are getting at least a $3,000 tax cut, and that's life-changing for so many. We know pre-pandemic, you mentioned a moment of renters. It's pre-pandemic, 25% of renters in this country paid more than half their income in rent. One thing goes wrong, forgetting a natural disaster, put that aside, but one thing goes wrong and their life turns upside down, their car breaks down, their child gets sick, they miss 3 days of work from a minor workplace injury. What barriers do renters specifically face in accessing housing recovery funding? Answer that, and I'm sorry, in the last few seconds, answer that, please, and then what we should do about it in reauthorization.
Sure. So there are two of the strongest vulnerabilities. Or one is that as renters, renters tend to be lower income than homeowners. They have obviously less built-in wealth to be able to recover and establish, and so they can't access funds like the Small Business Administration loan program because they don't have a home to hold the loan against. And so financially they're the hardest hit. That's the most important. Second, though, is that oftentimes in these communities, the rental housing is lost. Rental housing is damaged, just as single-family housing is damaged. But takes much longer to rebuild affordable rental housing in these communities. In my written testimony, I give a graph showing the different ranges of activities that CDBGDR provides, and the construction of the new affordable rental housing is the second longest of all the activities. So the earlier that starts, the likelier it'll be that you keep these people within the community and give them housing as quickly as possible. And making sure that rental housing is built as quickly as possible is absolutely critical.
Thank you, Senator Toomey.